If you want to start, I'm still clicking through these. I think I got most, but they also move around a bit, so it's I might miss some here and there.
So it's like a game of whack-a-mole?
Basically.
Okay. Well, move yourself out for a second so we can get this clean. I'll start over again and basically, in a much more clean way, explain that the situation in Floyd County is being addressed. They are working to pull their elections board together to allow for the rescanning of all of the early votes. They will back out the results that they have in election night reporting and their RTR, which is the results tally reporting, and then put the new results in, add that to their election management system, pull that out and add it to the election night reporting system, or ENR. And that will even out those numbers. Now, what will happen there, since we've seen the raw numbers, and those are unofficial, obviously, was 14,156 was the deficit the president was facing against former Vice President Biden. And there was a net pickup of 778 votes, it appears, on this one. So the new deficit will be 13,378. That's the outcome of that. It does not affect the runoff. The number of votes are actually very similar to the president and Senator Perdue as to what they need to avoid the runoff or win the election. So they're kind of tracked very close together. So it's about the same differential now that Senator Perdue would have to get to meet that issue. So that is that particular thing in Floyd County. It is being addressed. The audit worked. It found the issue. They were very troubled on these things. There was an additional issue with how they scanned their provisional ballots. It looks like they had 2 batches and they scanned 3 batches, which means they have a third more provisional ballots in the election night reporting than they should. We don't know the outcomes of those, but those will also be rescanned. Another thing I mentioned yesterday that's kind of overshadowed by the Floyd County issue was in Fulton County, we were opening up 2 specific investigations. One was how they handled the toilet leak, water leak, whatever you want to call it, at State Farm Arena, what was done, how that was handled, chain of custody, all those items, because there was a lot of confusion around that. And secondarily, how they were dealing with monitors and people along those lines. There's some other specific issues we've been talking, that we had a consent decree with them, and our monitors had some issues that he wanted to point out. There were some chain of custody issues surrounding the absentee ballots. Let's see. They were bounced around rooms, and it's just generally bad management. The same things we saw in Floyd with bad management, we see similar things in Fulton. We are investigating it. And the hour and a half, it looks like we pulled the videos from State Farm Arena to see if there was actually a time when they were scanning and processing when the monitors had either been told to leave or understood they were supposed to leave. So we're investigating that as well. It looks like they were violating the consent order that we had already entered with them by not giving credit for voting in a timely manner, which caused some more confusion on election day and prior to election day. So Fulton County will continue to be investigated for those fronts and for any potential violations of the consent order we entered into after the June election, but prior to the November election. I want to go over some of the statistics again that we saw concerning absentee ballot and signature matching. The state of Georgia entered a consent decree that essentially did one thing and one thing only. It allowed for 11 days from an election. Instead of giving 3 days to inform a voter there's an issue with their ballot, it's down to 24 hours when you're within 11 days of the election. That is the one and only thing that consent order addressed in any real way. And just to give you some context around this, in 2016, there were 580 ballots that were missing or had inaccurate oath statements, which is a signature basically, out of 246,000. In 2018, there was 454 out of 284,000. And in 2020, it's 2,011 out of 1.3 million. They all bounce around about 0.15%. So this is pretty consistent on this. One of the numbers you're seeing out there is a 3% rejection rate versus this 0.5% rejection rate, but they're comparing apples to oranges. That is including ballots. The biggest chunk of ballots that are rejected or counted as rejected showed up after the 7 p.m. deadline. That is where the majority of rejections come from. But for signature matches, always run around 0.15 to 0.2%. That is the normal thing we've seen in Georgia for years. And we also have a new situation now where Republicans and Democrats alike get these lists of people who have absentee ballots to cure, and they send teams around to help them cure their ballots. We saw a lot of that, especially in Fulton, because there were concerns that this suddenly showed up, but they had the photo ID, they had photocopies of the photo IDs, they matched up. So we saw a lot of that curing occurring. But it is unfortunate. We're still seeing management issues. They did better, but they still have some major issues that are, very big concerns for us. Another thing that we wanted to make sure we've been talking about, we're working on certifying this election. And then we're going to have to move into, we have to do this so we can get the UACAVA ballots out on Saturday to follow the federal law, to be that 45 days out from the January 5th election. So we've got to get this thing certified. We feel like we are on a good schedule right now with the audit. We are following the law. We are following the process. And this is what I've been saying from the beginning. The secretary has instructed us. Follow the law, and it's just process, process, process. I mean, this is a very well-defined item we're going through. The audit was in the law. We are following that. And it allows us to do a hand count. And let me, again, on the hand count, there are people out there, conspiracy theorists, are saying, oh, the QR code is flipping votes and everything. The whole point of the hand count is you look at what's on the ballot, either the hand marked ballot, the 1.3 million of those, or the 3.7 million, so the ballots came from BMDs or the QR codes. You're looking at the name. Those counters are looking at the name. They're handing it to the person sitting next to them, saying they're looking at the name, they're putting it in the stacks, and they are physically counting them as human beings to assure that what was scanned is actually correct. And so far, we're seeing that in the vast majority of the counties. Some of them are off by 1 or 2, which you expect when human beings do this. So the audit's going well. We're at 4.7 million out of the little over 5 million votes that were cast. So it's Tuesday. We got till midnight on Wednesday. Now, the first step is this physical counting process. They have to get through that process, and then we have a quality control process to make sure, did you put your data entry in correct? Are your tally sheets correct? So there's a lot of moving parts to this, but Voting Works is here on the ground. We have, a lot of people who are helping to make sure this is a tight process. Many of the counties are coming back at spot dead on, that they have no more votes, no less votes, and the vote counts are coming out the same. Other counties, the one thing I've seen for a lot of these elections directors is they are perfectionists. If they're off by 3, they want to dig in and figure out why they're off by 3. And it could be as simple as, if you had an absentee ballots and 2 of them stuck together and went through the machine together at one time, and you're never going to necessarily be able to know the difference on that, because those are the kind of things you see in an election. Another thing I want to make clear, there will have been illegal votes cast. We know that. In every single election in the history of mankind, there will be illegal votes cast. We have not seen any evidence of 13,378 of those cast. We know that there are some double voters. We dug into some of that and realized that it was entry errors by counties where they tagged people the wrong way. Another thing that we've seen is potential felon voters, but some of those people might be in a position where their rights are fully restored to vote. So we have investigators physically tracking those down. And understand, when we have these things, as an example, when we found the double voters in the June and August elections, we send investigators to interview this. That's 1,200 interviews. We have 24 investigators. 2 of them are specifically tasked with just election stuff under this state election board. So it's going to take some time to get through all this. But again, we've seen nothing that indicates that there is a high percentage, or such a high percentage, that it would change the outcome of the vote. Our goal is to have the cleanest possible election. And if anybody has any reports of actual irregularities, our investigators will investigate. Another thing that I want to make sure that the secretary is clear on with everybody is we've again seen more Democrats and people, even in California, talk about coming to Georgia and voting in our elections. Understand, if your goal is to come here just to vote in the election and go back to your home state of residency, you're violating state law. And secondarily, this is another potential case that I know may come up. If somebody moves from one state where they cast a vote for Senate into another state to try to cast another vote for the same body that will be seated, that would potentially violate the United States Constitution, because you can't get 2 different sets of votes to seat a body that will be seated in January. So there'll potentially be some issues along that front as well. So our goal is to have the cleanest and fairest election we can and give people the understanding of faith that the outcome is actually the outcome, that the winner is the winner, and the person who came in second place came in second place. Now, to get ahead of some of the other questions, this hand audit we're doing right now is for the state to move to certification. Under our state law, the second place finisher, if they are within 0.5 or lower % of the vote of the first place finisher, may ask for a recount. And that recount would follow our state election board rules. And essentially, we've already procured a high-speed, high-capacity central scanner for every single county because we did a pretty good job of negotiating and getting the prices down on the original deal that we did to get our new voting system to bring paper to Georgia. So what they would do is they would create a test deck. And as an example, you'd say you'd have 50 for Trump, 40 for Biden, and 10 for Joe Jorgensen. And you do a mix of ballot marking device and hand marked ballots. And you would run those through that scanner. You get the report, the hope and intent is you're verifying that the scanner is counting properly. And it would be 50 for Trump, 40 for Biden, and then 10 for Jorgensen. Then you clear that out. You put your tally back to 0. And then you scan every single ballot again through those things. The large counties have multiples of these. And one other thing I want to go back, we are sending some additional high-speed scanners to Floyd County so they can get through the process of rescanning more quickly than just doing it on a single scanner. So that we are getting the logistical part of that done to help them get their results up more quickly. Because we know we want to get these things done. We feel like we're on a good path. The audit is moving apace. And by the fact that we're down to the last 300,000 or so of the hand counting, we feel very good that we can look for any issues, look for any anomalies, find where they might be, correct them on the data side, correct them on the counting side, and then have the full audit available by our deadline of Wednesday at midnight, and then be able to move to the certification phase going into Friday so we can get those UACAVA ballots out, the military ballots on Saturday. So with that, I will open up to your questions. And the way we're going to do this is Walter and Ari are kind of going to go through your chat or look through your raised hands, and we'll try to unmute people one at a time. We don't want people kind of talking over each other. So let's start off with that, okay? So what do we got, Ari or Walter?
Actually, it's a little quicker if people raise their hand. Use a little raise their hand app.
I see Miles physically raising his hand, so maybe you can unmute him. Oh, Steve, he's first. He got it. Can you unmute Stephen?
Oh, let's see. I got Miles. You have to unmute yourself.
I just did. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Gabe, if just clarify a point for me.
Sure.
The risk limiting audit, which it's been called a recount, but it really isn't a recount, et cetera. But what you're still calling it an audit, correct?
It is a hand audit, yes.
Okay. Will the numbers that you get to by midnight tomorrow, will they in any way impact or change the numbers you certify on the 20th?
The intent right now, as you know, an audit is there to verify the results that were reported through the election management systems. Knowing that human beings are the flawed part of this process, the intent would be we would say the numbers, and also state law requires we report by precinct, and there's no way to get precinct level data out of the Arlo tool. So we are not changing the results based on the hand count, but it is verifying the results that have been reported. That is the intent we're following right now because it follows state law, and it keeps us in a clean way able to have the precinct level results still as our final certified results.
So it won't change the actual certified number.
Correct. Now, there are people who are still doing onesie, twosie things, and obviously the Floyd County thing will do that. They have the ability to go through, make sure they have all their provisionals in, everything's in right. But for the most part, we're not going to see any real changes moving forward other than that Floyd County thing, more than likely.
And Gabe, you're good at explaining this. And I think the thing I heard most frequently as I ran into observers as I went around the 3 or 4 counties over the past few days is why aren't they verifying signatures? And I tried to explain to people, given my limited knowledge of all this, that happened a long time ago and that there are no signatures on ballots. Could you just explain and clear this up? Because there seems to be a lot of confusion on the secrecy of ballots and whether ballots have any identification on them.
Okay, thanks for the question, Miles. Essentially, the process is this. You make a request. There's basically 2 signature verifications or an identification verification that happens. You make a request, say you do it on paper. You are signing that request. That gets mailed in. Elections officials at the county level look at your signature, then they look either in the ENET system, because there are signatures that are stored there to verify it, or if they can't have an ENET system, some of them have a local drive where they scan signatures that are attached to the voter file there. And if they don't have either of those, then they literally will go to the old paper records that they keep on file essentially forever to compare the signatures. That's step 1, and that's for the request side. The other identification side is that if you use the absentee ballot portal, you're using your driver's license number as a unique PIN identifier that allows us to say, yes, this is a person. We know who they are. Their driver's license is attached to the voter registration form. So that's the other way you can get the county to send you an absentee ballot. Step 2 is you get that ballot. You make your choices. You fold it up. You put it in the secrecy sleeve. Then you put that secrecy envelope into the actual return envelope. On the outside of the return envelope, there is an oath. On the oath, you're basically saying, I am who I say I am. I'm following the law, and this is, me. I'm not committing any fraud. So they sign that. That gets sent back to the county. So the county then has additional, they have the new request form signature you just sent them, plus they have all the other signatures to compare that to. And that is where their verification takes place at that time. And then they go into the voter registration system. If the signatures match and say, this is a match, we have now accepted this ballot. They then remove the secrecy envelope from the ballot. They are separated at that point because Georgia state constitution requires ballot privacy and ballot secrecy. So there's no way to tie the actual ballot back to that original signature anymore because Georgia law does not allow for that. Now, they do keep those envelopes on record for 2 years. They keep those requests on record for 2 years to go back and look if there's anything on discovery. And if somebody wants to file a lawsuit and go look at those things, there's nothing stopping them from doing that if they can show any evidence to do that. So right now, there's nothing in the law for this office or the counties to go back and recertify signatures that they already certified. So I hope that is a good enough explanation. People understand where we stand on this. And one of the things we did this year is we brought in representatives of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to come in and do additional training for the county elections officials on how you do signature match. But one of the things I think the secretary wants to look at is a less subjective way to identify voters, because it is subjective. I really like the portal. We like the portal because that is objective. Do you know this driver's license number? Do you not know this driver's license number? Is it in your pocket? Is it not in your pocket? It's a really good way to do those kind of things. So we were going to look at ways to potentially tighten it up and take away the subjectivity of this in the long term. But thank you for that question. Who's next?
Quinn Scanlon has got her hand up.
Okay.
Hey, Gabe. I think I have a question that many others are having as well. I'm pretty positive that the Secretary of State's office has been saying that the results of the audit is what would be certified. So is this different now that it's going to be the original results?
It's a little bit different now because we were looking at the law, trying to understand the best way to follow the law and make sure that we got the results in that would be there and follow the law. There's not really a way to say, we'll replace this. Other states have specific things saying the outcomes of the audits will be the new certified results. We don't have that in Georgia right now. That may be something we look at doing, that if you do a recount like this, a hand audit like this, that this may be the final number. But right now, the whole intent of an audit is it's going to verify the results we already saw. And especially just logistically, there's no way to get these results out of Arlo, which is the tool we're using, and at the precinct level, because that's where you need to report your results to, is the precinct level. So that's going back and forth with lawyers. This is the first time we've done this. First time we've had paper in 20 years. So there was an opinion. We thought we were going to go down a path, and then we kind of rethought it and said, the more legally stable way is to do it this way.
Okay, and then just one quick follow-up. I think based on what you said previously, I'm understanding correctly, but you're sending more scanners to Floyd County because they are not hand counting, again, all the early voted ballots. They are rescanning every single
their audit. They have done the physical part of their audit. Right now, we discovered an issue, so we're scanning those ballots, all of the early vote ballots back in. And it looks like all of the provisional ballots back in. So that we'll back those two things out of the election management system and put these results in as the final results, because obviously they need to be correct. And the audit found this issue. And the fastest way to do that is to throw some additional scanners out. They should be able to do it today, but they have to have their they have to have their elections board say, yes, do that. So they're trying to pull those people together right now. I don't know where they stand in terms of timing.
Okay, and just by early voted ballots, you mean the in-person ones, correct? Not the absentee?
Absolutely, yes. Early vote, understand, when I say early vote, that's absentee in person. That is the ballots that were done on the ballot marking devices in person in the 3-week plus 1 mandatory Saturday period of time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Quinn. Who's next?
Okay, M. Walker has had her hand up.
Hi, it's Amaryl Walker with CNN. Hey there, Gabe.
Hey
so you were mentioning that the vast majority of counties are basically going to be reporting minor to no discrepancies with their hand recount. Will the Secretary of State be releasing the numbers, say, hey, the overall number discrepancy is, 600 votes or 600 margin?
Yes, we will add that, if I can do this, quarantine time. We will be releasing all the results of the audit. In fact, we're getting them to scan in their tally sheets so that everybody can go look at them. We've been encouraged by the transparency of so many counties live streaming it, putting it on Facebook Live, and letting in as many monitors as physically can work while still having the room be functional. So,
and how soon do you think
we possibly can with that? So there will be a county by county level plus a statewide level of where you're off. And there's two things to be off on: number of ballots, and then there's also the potential to be off within the count itself for the presidential race. Those are two separate numbers that will both be reported at the end of the process.
If the counties all finish today with uploading, the data entry, when do you anticipate we could see these numbers? Let's say if they finish today.
I think by trying to get through the quality control process of the audit, we will probably push into tomorrow. But my hope is we can, we might need every minute of that midnight deadline. Maybe we'll be done by dinner. Because it's a lot of counties, it's a lot of ballots. Like I said, a bunch of the counties are off the table; they're good to go. But some of the larger ones, there are going to be some discrepancies, so they got to figure out why they're there. And mostly, when you see these kind of things, you'll see, as an example, there's one county right now that I think they're undercounted by 394, which just happens to be 2 batches. That's the exact number of them when they're doing it. So they've got the 2 batches. They're gonna hand count those and add them to the totals. But that's the kind of stuff you see after you do your data entry. We saw a couple of places where they inverted the data entry, and they easily saw that, so they fixed that. But it takes time. It's just a process, and we're going to continue to follow the process, follow the rules, and follow the law. But once we get to that final number, we will release all that, plus all of the backup data, the tally sheets, everything.
Could you say, though, right now, the majority or 60% have come back with spot on, no differences at all?
I'll have to go pull up the Arlo tool to see where we're at right now, because it changes over time. And I don't have an answer to that, but I will try to, maybe at our 4 o'clock conference, I might be able to give you a better answer for that if that works.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Raul Bali has his hand up.
Okay.
Dave, technical question. So right now on the website, counties had to certify the results by last Friday, and there's still 10 counties. Is that just a matter of it not being in the tool yet, or do you have 10 counties that have not certified by Friday?
We have 10 counties that didn't get their stuff done. We were, as you noticed yesterday, we had a bunch of them finish up because a lot of them, they're all doing a lot of things at once. So
you can say all 159 counties have certified.
I actually can't say that yet because we've tried to talk to them to make sure they have before we say that.
Okay.
So that's what we're trying to get to.
So when those results, and your expectation is Floyd is going to pull their numbers back, reload, and so then when that number, that certified 159 pops up with Floyd done, those will be the results for the state of Georgia that you will certify later this week.
That is the intent right now, Raul. But I got a quick question. Are you in COVID quarantine? Because that hair, man, come on, it's going.
I've got 2 virtual classrooms behind me going right now, and my wife on a conference too.
Okay. All right. Who do we got next?
Stephen Fowler has his hand up for a long time.
So Gabe, risk limiting audits are supposed to prove that the correct winner won, not look at the exact margins. And so is that, just so I'm clear, the rationale for why the original county certification totals will stand, because an RLA doesn't examine margins, but rather the correct winner?
It's really threefold. What you just said, the whole point of an audit is to prove the outcome is correct. 2, our law requires that we report by precinct, which you cannot do in the Arlo tool. And this logistically is more defensible under our law and physically easier to do because the RTR, which is the returns tally reporting system, and our ENR, which is the election reporting system, are built to give that precinct level data that we need to have for everybody to follow our law. So that is the rationale behind that, yes. There are several rationales, but those are the 3 basics. All right, who's next?
W. Brewer.
Hi, this is Wes Brewer with CNN. Thanks so much, Gabriel. Appreciate it. regarding what Secretary of State Raffensperger said yesterday regarding his conversation with Senator Graham about invalidating absentee ballots, Mr. Raffensperger said that staffers were on the call with him. Were you or anybody else present on the Zoom meeting?
Yes, I was.
In the room?
It was a phone call, so.
Can you tell us what you heard, Mr. Senator Graham said?
Listen, the back and forth, I was only on for part of it, so I didn't hear it all because I had to go do a CNN interview with Aaron. So what I heard was basically discussions about absentee ballots, and if there was a percentage of signatures that weren't really truly matching, is there some point where you could get to where you could say, if somebody went to a courtroom, could say, we'll throw out all these ballots because we have no way of knowing because the ballots are separated. And that was partially what was going on. I could see how Senator Graham viewed it one way and Secretary Raffensperger viewed it one way. But, our job in this state is to follow the law and follow the process. And that's what we continue to do. There's no physical ability for this office to do anything along those lines. And if somebody wanted to go that route, they could go the court route.
Would you say, how would you characterize his request? Is that something that was unseemly of the process, or you say he saw it one way and you all saw it another way?
I'm not going to get into Senator Graham's mind, and I'm not going to get into Secretary Raffensperger's mind. I think they are both discussing. I can see how both sides of that could potentially be correct, but the president's going to continue to fight. His supporters will continue to fight. Our job is to continue to follow the law, and we were answering process questions. That's what we're doing on the call.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Julie Jester, excuse me.
Hi, thanks for doing this call. My question is, have any other Republicans, either within Georgia or outside the state, reached out to Secretary Raffensperger with concerns or privately in support of the actions he's taken in Georgia?
I don't keep up with the Secretary's correspondence. I do know that there are many Republicans who have thanked us for staying true to the process and following the law, because we are a nation of law, not a nation of men, and we will continue to do so. Right now, it's a time when I know that emotions are high. The president is obviously a fighter, and he has every recourse to follow the due process afforded to him under our Constitution and under state laws, under federal law. I anticipate that we will see lawsuits. I know one was just dismissed in the Southern District of Georgia yesterday, I believe. Lynn Wood has a lawsuit in right now. It will go through the process. I don't believe that it will necessarily yield anything, but I'm not a lawyer. And, we will allow the courts to do their business, and we will continue to follow the state law until a court says, but deviate from the plan we're on right now. So our plan we're on right now is finish the audit, certify the results, get the UACAVA ballots mailed out for January 5th, and then really look out for anybody coming from California or New York or Florida or anywhere else coming to our state to try to vote. Because that's the next big step that's going to be happening. We've seen, social media and other people trying to do those kind of things. And as I've said before, if you come and do that, it is a 10-year prison sentence potentially and a $100,000 fine. It is a felony, and it is a big one. So I wouldn't recommend risking it. So I think once we talked about that, Mr. Yang kind of backpedaled from his original moving to Georgia, I'm just going to campaign in Georgia. And it is everybody's right to come and First Amendment right to come and campaign. And like I said in the conference the other day, if you are moving to be part of the #1 state in Georgia in the country to do business, there's the state of Georgia. We are happy to have you. If you want to rent a house, start a business, buy a home, and be an actual resident here, that's fine. But don't come here to try to game our system.
Kate Tobin has had her hand up for a while.
Hey, Kate.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand the county and the state sort of certification rules here. So Floyd certified their results last Friday, and now they have turned up these additional ballots. And so there's an established process for them to amend their certification with new numbers.
Correct.
Now, Georgia is going to certify on Friday. Is
Yes.
there also a process in place for you to amend your numbers if another county turns out to have had a problem, or if your Fulton investigations yield something, you can update your numbers after Friday?
As I understand it, once we certify and get those ballots out, I don't know of a path that allows for that, but I'm not the lawyer. That might be a better suited to Ryan Germany, our general counsel. But our intent is to follow our rules, which is everybody ought to be done. Everybody ought to have their stuff certified, and then we will certify their final numbers. I don't foresee a situation that would potentially change the thing or have us not certified by Friday, barring a court telling us don't certify by Friday. That is the intent, and that is the goal.
Okay, so under normal circumstances, state certification is it. Once you certify, that's that.
Did you just throw the word normal out for some reason? I mean,
not these circumstances, but in the past, when you've certified, that's the end.
Correct.
Okay, understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Emil Moffitt.
Hey, good morning, Gabe. Question for you regarding Senator Graham's claims. Wouldn't a higher rejection rate mean that the system of signature verification is actually working?
One would potentially think that, yes. I mean, what we saw is in Fulton, they did have a higher rejection rate this year than they had in 18 individually. And we saw on the provisional side a similar thing. So as near as we can tell, the system is working the way it's intended. And they potentially, maybe what they were really thinking was a lower rejection rate compared to what they thought might have been necessary. So yeah, that's sort of backwards math on that. I think you're right. If a higher rejection rate would probably show, the system's working the way it's supposed to. An incredibly low one would show that there might be a problem. But the thing is, it's incredibly low in general because most people are getting their signature matches done and the counties are doing their jobs properly. As near as we can tell, we've had no specific instance of people saying, I know signature match what's being done improperly at this point. If any evidence of that does come up, we will obviously, vigorously go after that and try to bring it before the state election board with our investigators. Because the whole point of this is we want evidence. Going on Twitter, going on Facebook, and making claims is not providing evidence under a nation that is, directed by laws. There is due process in this country. And if people want to go through a discovery process and they have evidence, they can file a suit and do those things. And we're still in that time. The president has every right to follow all of his, due process to come to a point where, he can say he's exhausted his efforts on this front.
Thanks, Gabe.
Thank you.
Nicole Carr.
Hi there. Do you all have any active investigations into election worker harassment or intimidation in any of the counties?
I can't speak to that directly. I do know that we had some people who were, I know one particular one in Fulton, but again, that goes down to a more local level of the sheriff's office providing security on some of those fronts. Our main state, we investigate things around the state election board rules and around election law. Harassment and intimidation is really a more strictly law enforcement kind of scenario. So I would think most of those questions would be directed down to the local sheriff who's supposed to provide security for the elections themselves, or the police departments where the people are residents.
Nick Wooten.
Hey, Gabe, had a process question for you.
Process, exciting.
Yeah. So you've mentioned that this audit is not going to change sort of the actual vote tally or vote count. Like, we're going to certify whatever the counties have found.
Right.
Floyd County seems like an exception because they found so many ballots that were sort of left. What's the certain threshold for when a county sort of has to amend?
Something like this, the whole point of the audit is to, find issues. And what they're doing is they're going to go through and recertify this one because they're missing those ballots from the totals. If it gets to a point, I don't have a thing in it's just kind of like Justice Black's, I know it when I see it. So this particular one was obvious. It's obvious they have to get those returns in. It's obvious they have to get those put into the election night reporting so we can split them over the precincts and follow state law. So I don't foresee anything along these lines. Like I said before, it's one or two. And the thing is, we don't necessarily know from what precinct those are because they're not tied back to those things originally. So that's kind of the issue you're at with those right now. So again, we know it when we see it. This is obvious, and we will work with Floyd County to get their recertification done in time for us to do our state certification. So those final tallies will be part of the final certification of the state results.
Okay, thanks. Perfect.
Yeah. I think Justin's up next, isn't he, Walter?
Yeah, Justin.
Hey, yeah, just to be very clear about these Fulton investigations, can you describe if there is any evidence of significant wrongdoing in Fulton? We're hearing so many kind of conspiracy theories out there, so I want you to be very clear about what you're seeing in Fulton and what you're actually investigating.
What we're seeing in Fulton right now is managerial sloppiness, which opens the door for potential problems. If you're not doing your chain of custody properly, that's the kind of thing that can lead to potential issues of somebody saying, hey, these ballots were left alone, or these ballots, who knows what happened with those ballots. Similarly, with the issue around the State Farm toilet leak, water leak, whatever you want to call it, how that was handled on the chain of custody side at the beginning of the morning, because we knew about it at 5:30 that morning, kind of broke that night. So there are stories out there where they sort of combined the water leak story with they asked the observers to leave story, which were really, I think, about 17 hours apart. So they don't really tie together on that front. But managerial sloppiness, failure to attention to detail, those are the things that open the door to issues. I mean, one of the things I talked about here was specifically in the consent decree, is they said they were enter credit for voting in a timely manner. By not doing so, that upped the provisional votes, and people were confused. They said, I don't know if my absentee ballot was received or not. So it leads to confusion. It leads to problems. So that's where that's coming from on that front. And that's what we're specifically investigating.
And just to be clear about the observers, because I know you and I were talking about it that night, and you were saying your people were there, they were watching. Can you clear that up for me again?
We had a monitor there, but the way State Farm was set up, there was multiple rooms for things in some cases. And our investigator went there once we had an investigator there who had left, and we sent somebody back. So there may be a time period where not everything was looked at one time. And that's what we're trying to get down to. That's why we're looking at the video from State Farm and trying to get down to what exactly the timeline was, and making sure that there was an observer there. And if there wasn't, then we have to account for why that was and who made those decisions internally at Fulton to say it's time for you people to go. So that's what we're trying to get to right now, is the truth of that. Because as you said, there's a lot of stuff flying around on Twitter and Facebook that is, touches fact, but doesn't necessarily have all the facts or the evidence. And that's what we're trying to get to.
Okay, Nicole Carr.
Hey, I'm sorry. I had a quick follow-up to the question about elections workers. If harassment or threats tie back to observers, does that fall within your office?
I don't know. It may, but I have to check with our general counsel and our chief investigator to know for certain. So we'll try to follow up with you later today about that. Okay, Nicole?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Archith.
Archith, come on. Yes.
Hey guys, sorry. Hey Gabe, sorry. I just had to restart real quick. We just got a little update from Senator Lindsey Graham. You might have touched this before. How does the Secretary of State respond to that? There's sort of a back and forth.
I didn't hear what it was. Let me see. Well, I responded to this earlier if you want to get the recording on that one. Basically, I was on the call as well, and there were process questions, but it looked like they were going down a path to try to say if there's a county that has, an out of proportion amount of ballots let through or cancel or whatever, you can question the entire count because they are separated from each other. That was sort of the process conversation that we were having. And I had to jump off the call partway through because I was getting ready for another interview. But again, Secretary Raffensperger, I know that's the way he perceived that when he and I talked about that. And I'm sure Senator Graham is perceiving it his way, but going down the path of potentially saying entire counties need to be redone there's no path for this office to do that. There is a path within a court of law to try to do that. So I think that was kind of the discussion that was had on that front, but it's not something we would think would be a good or rational way to do election administration after the fact, because these counties have apparently, from our point of view, from what we have seen, done their jobs, appropriately done the signature match, which has actually been enhanced by this office with extra tools, and having the online portal, which has a driver's license thing, which makes it a objective identification versus a subjective identification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh Letterman hadn't asked a question.
Hey, thank you guys for doing this. Can you walk us through how, if in Floyd County, if you had not had this unprecedented hand recount of every single vote in the state, how, if and how this problem would have been detected, and how you would have resolved it?
I'm not sure right now, because the problem was they have several things that happened to them. Their number one director is on COVID quarantine. Their number two person fell and broke her hip on election day. So they're down to the number three person and a volunteer, as I understand it, who are running that office right now. How it would have been discovered? I don't have a good answer for that right now. And it's one of the things we're gonna have to look in our own processes and systems, because most counties, they keep track of their memory cards. They keep track of these things. And what happened was on October 24th, a scanner had an issue. They replaced the scanner, and the plan was to rescan those ballots. And it looks like those ballots were taken, they were segregated, they were put to the side, and they were sealed in a box. They had a number on them. And apparently, they may not have been scanned. And that's what we're trying to investigate to get the real details on, because that's from talking to our vendor and some of the basic information on the ground is that October 24th, there was a log mismatch. And that means the scanner can no longer function properly. And normally how that happens is they powered it down wrong. They basically held it down. Because there's two memory cards in every one of the polling place scanners. If they power it down by holding the button down for too long, basically it writes on one card and never gets a chance to write on the other card. So when you turn it back on, the cards don't match. It says, hey, these cards don't match. Something is weird. And that's why they had to go through and look at rescanning all those things, because it looks like they probably powered it down wrong, but we haven't had a full investigation on the log files on that just yet. But that happened on October 24th, and that's when it was replaced, and they were supposed to take those ballots and rescan them on the central scanner. They had issues. I mean, as I pointed out in our conference yesterday, some of y'all may not have been on it, this county had some issues in the August runoff where they did not follow the SEB rule of having 10% of emergency ballots in place. They didn't move to the normal backup plan, which is to use ballot activation codes. Now we have this managerial issue. So there's problems within that office, which is why the secretary was asking for the director of that elections division to step down. It's just the managerial issues are just too great at this point. Yeah, follow up?
Yeah. Do you have any indication of whether he's going to accede that call to step down?
I do not personally. We've been trying to get in touch with him for about 2 days. And like I said, he is in COVID quarantine. He did not respond to our elections director calls for about 2 days. So we were kind of left to kind of figure it out and have our people on the ground and work with his county elections board to get this resolved.
Okay, one follow-up question from M. Walker.
Sorry, Gabe, just a couple of quick follow-ups regarding Floyd County, Gabe. You said that all of those votes the early votes will be rescanned and there will not be a hand recount after?
Correct. I mean, the audit's already been done of the ballots they had, so there was no need to do an audit after the fact.
Okay. And do you expect the Trump campaign to request a recount, because you have obviously procured new machines, high-speed machines for all the counties?
Well, we procured those, months ago before that came up, because we kind of looked at what happened in 2018 and said, there will be a point in the future, little did we know it would be this year, where somebody's going to be within a half a statewide. It is their right to do so. This hand recount is unprecedented, or hand audit is unprecedented. It will verify that the scanners, put out results that are based on the human readable portions of the ballots, which, helps to quell some of those thoughts and those wild claims that machines were flipping votes and they weren't counting votes properly. I mean, right now we're saying the machines counted the votes absolutely as they were voted by voters.
And lastly, on the consent,
it is their right to ask for this recount. And I explained at the beginning of the call how that recount would work if it was requested.
And lastly, on the consent decree, because President Trump has been tweeting a lot about, claims that signature verification isn't happening because of this consent decree. It has nothing to do with signature verification happening at the audit level. It only has to do with the time that a voter has to cure his or her signature, correct?
It's not even the time they have to cure, it's the time of notification from the county. That's the main thing that was changed based on that consent decree. Essentially, the historical way the law works is you have 3 days to notify people, and that was pretty consistent all the way through. This lawsuit, we settled to basically say if it's within 11 days of an election, you have to notify them within 24 hours. Because as you get close to the election, obviously, you have up to 3 days after the election to cure a ballot. So if you do it early, you have a month and 3 days. But as you get close to the election, the intent is to let people know more quickly so they can get it cured as it goes into that logistically tougher time for counties to get done. So that was the thing that was changed in this consent decree. It did not weaken signature match. It did not say you can only have to go back to the original signature you had, because the whole point is the signature on the request is already matched back to the original signatures you have on file. So it's a canard. It's a rabbit hole. I know people want to find a way to help the president win because they are strong supporters and he's a fighter till the end, I know, and they can follow the law and all their due process to get to that point. But this particular issue has zero to do with how the audit works. It has zero to do with signature. We didn't change anything in signature match other than we did extra training and gave people more time to get the notifications to give them more time to cure their ballots. So you're correct.
And those absentee ballots, once it's separated from the envelope, on the absentee ballot, there is no way to identify who the voter is. There's no ID number, nothing. It's just all you see is what votes.
Yeah, I mean, literally, when you have the outer envelope that has signature on it, inside that is something called a secrecy envelope. So that way, when you take the envelope that's been signed, you put it over here, you then stack the secrecy envelope over there, and there is never a way to go back and find the individual voter attached to that, because that would be against the state constitution of Georgia, which protects the right to privacy of every vote and every voter. If there was some mechanism by which to do that, we could get to the point of vote buying again. And we can't have that. It's the reason you can't take a picture inside a polling location. So that is the reason that's done that way. But there is no way to tie a ballot back to the original signed envelope.
Okay, next we have Amy Gardner.
Thank you. Hey, Gabe. I have a couple of really small questions. First of all, how many ballots are you thinking were affected by this chain of custody issue that you talked about at
No
State
idea.
Farm?
No idea. That's why we have to do the investigation.
I mean, is there a upper limit that it could be based on what was there?
Well, let's see. If it's absentee ballots in Fulton County, I don't know the number off the top of my head. But those are the ones we'll be talking about on the chain of custody side right now. And the other side of it, it's not just absentees. There's two different things that happened at State Farm Arena. There's also the ballots that were the early vote ballots. And I'm not sure if that's included in the same thing. This is from our monitor who was tracking a lot of these issues, and he has several pages of reports on some of this stuff. So that's part of the concerns we have coming out of that.
Okay, thanks. And then you said earlier that you are hoping to have exact numbers of how many counties had perfect audit numbers compared to the original count. Do you know now how Fulton did?
No, I do not. I think they're still going through their quality control process because obviously they have hundreds of thousands of ballots. So that will likely be tomorrow before we're finished with them.
Okay, and then following up on the question I think that Miles asked about what would change and what wouldn't change in the certified numbers based on the audit. So I just want to make sure I understand correctly. You're not going to change numbers if it's like a discrepancy of 1 or 2 votes because you can't segregate it by precinct. Is that correct?
That's part of the rationale. And also our law doesn't allow for it. In some states, the audit results then become, if it moves to a full hand audit, they become the final results. In our state law, it doesn't contemplate that. Now we may look at changing that with the legislature in January, but as of this point, it does not. So that's 1. 2, it does report by precinct, and the Arlo outputs do not have precinct level data, so we wouldn't be able to certify the way we traditionally have certified. So it makes more sense to have the audit do its job, which is to verify the winners of the contest. And
so what do you do about the number that you do want to change in Floyd? If you
they're going to recertify inside of our system,
but not by precinct.
They're going to rescan all their stuff. And then they're going to back out the stuff they put into election night reporting and RTR and put it back in with the new results. They will then certify that, and then we will certify that final result.
Can they do that by precinct level? Do they have multiple precincts in Floyd County?
Yes, because when you have early votes, they're done on the ballot marking device. So there is a ballot. We know from whence the ballots come.
Got it.
That's how that works. All the early vote is done that way. There's a code inside of the QR code, which says the ballot styles tie back to precincts. Those feed into the election management system, which then feeds it back out to the election night reporting system by precinct. Does that track for you? Okay.
We've got time for one last question, and Kelly Myers had her hand up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hi, I'm Kelly Meyer. I'm with Next Star Media Group as well, but here in the DC Bureau. So I'll focus this one back to conversations around Graham. I just wanted to ask, you know, should this conversation or call even be happening with a senator from South Carolina? Should a senator from South Carolina be involved in Georgia's election affairs and results and conversations like this?
I think that in the United States, we have our freedom of speech. And if Senator Warren called, I think we'd probably take the call to have a conversation, to answer questions about our process and what's happening in Georgia. There's no need to not have those kind of questions. Everybody on that call was a Republican probably, but I answer questions from Democrats all the time, and I don't see anything necessarily wrong with that. Senators, I believe, they represent their people, and they are trying to understand the processes here. And he asked some questions that might have gone, a little to the edge of something that people might have said, well, why is he asking this kind of questions? The secretary heard it that way. There were process questions. We did suggest that there was nothing within our law to let anything like that happen, but they can go do their due process and go to a court to ask for those kind of things. And that's what the president has every right to go to court to figure out what is the best path to make sure that their vote is protected. And we understand that. And there's nothing wrong with going to court on some of those things, but you need to have evidence. And so far, we haven't seen that kind of evidence that would require anything to be done to not certify our election results. So our intent is to continue to follow state law, get the audit done on time, and then certify our results and get the military and overseas ballots out the door on Saturday.
Did what Graham had to say concern you or alarm you at all, or that he was seemingly to go down that road?
At this point, I don't get that alarmed. I mean, right now we're answering process questions. I'm answering all your process questions. We're answering his process questions. The whole point, we've been saying since really Tuesday night and Wednesday day, we're going to follow the process. We're going to follow the law. We're going to be transparent. If somebody has a question, we're trying to answer it. And that's true of Senator Graham, and that's true for you. So we are here trying to do our jobs as openly and transparently as we can. And as y'all might have seen my first press conference on Wednesday, I basically said, I can't believe I punched y'all out. So because we answered every question that was asked. So we're trying to do that still. We have another conference coming up at 4:00. I again want to thank everybody for being on the call today. If you have any follow-ups, please follow up with Walter or Ari. We'll try to get you any answers. And I know we said we had a couple of questions we're going to try to answer by the 4:00 call, but we'll do our best to get those answers together. I know Nicole had one. I know Amy, I saw you raising your hand, so we'll try to get back with you. But again, thank you for what you do. And please, we'll see you at 4:00 and get your questions ready for another exciting Georgia election update. So thanks a lot, guys.